Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today we're on with Matthew Plese. Matthew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, happy to, Alex. Where do you like me to start?
I know you started a business. Maybe let's start with what's your business and what are you doing today?
Yep. So I am the president of catechismclass.com. Our organization actually started in 2004. I've been involved with it since 2007, 2008, in a role of leading the organization since 2010. So you're talking about over 15 years leading the organization. It was actually a really long time, I feel like, in business standards today. But I very much feel like I'm still running a small micro business like most Americans do. People out there who want to start a business, want to get into business, you start at the foundation, you build up from there. So I very much feel the same as everybody else in issues like that. The
Yeah.
entrepreneurial dream.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to get into Matt's business and more particularly something we've been working on together, which is optimizing his Google Ads campaigns, which is driving traffic. So this is an online business. It's a B2C business.
Yes, primarily B to C. We do have some B to B with institutional buyers, but primarily B to C. And how do you reach them? How do you see if your advertising is effective? As a small business, where I spend my money and how I spend it and what return I get on it is really critical, way more important than in big organizations where you just have a budget and you have to use it. As a small business owner, you have limited funds. No matter how big the funds are, they're still limited, and you always want to deploy them in the most strategic way.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about that. When one of the first things we did when we started working together was implement conversion values to Google Ads because this then tells Google how much return is coming from the spend to bring customers in. And of course, then there's this question of organic versus what we could say is inevitable journeys versus influenceable journeys. You want to make sure you're not spending your money against journeys that would have happened anyway. So this is what we would call more branded search, where you're bidding on things that organically you'll show up really well on. You have really good SEO already,
Yes.
so there wasn't much of a need to focus on the branded terms. And one sneaky thing that Google does is when you have a broad search keyword, then Google can really have flexibility with what searches that keyword applies to, and it's going to end up optimizing towards capturing as many journeys as possible. Google doesn't have an incentive to pick the journeys that wouldn't otherwise convert. They have an incentive to show you the highest ROI possible. So that's why Matt is focused on making sure that only the keywords that indicate we're tapping into a user journey that wouldn't necessarily end up in a in end up in a journey that lands on his site are bid on. So how did we do that, right? Like how did we determine what search keywords would not result in a journey to his site versus which ones would? We did some work on keyword analysis to provide us different lists that said how Matt's keywords were ranking for his site and also other journeys that may be going to different competitors, what keywords were really strong for other journeys that wouldn't end up on his site. And so we used this understanding of which keywords Matt had really strong organic presence for versus he didn't have a strong organic presence for. And that's the keywords that Google Ads really provides value in bidding on.
Right.
So that's a really important thing for anybody that's using Google Ads is make sure that if you're using Google Ads the way that it was initially intended to be used, which is to tap into journeys that you otherwise wouldn't be in. These aren't journeys where people are searching for your product. They're journeys where they're searching for maybe a competitor or something that you don't organically position. You're not organically positioned in the top 5 or 10 search results. And you do want to be in that journey because there's intent in those search terms. So we used those different keywords lists to determine which keywords should be added and removed based on the strength in where his website landed organically. That was part of the optimizations, and there was a few more And before we get into results and more of the numbers, let's just talk more strategically what we were doing. There were things like looking at how strong the creative was, because
Right.
Google will tell you if your creative, your ads that you're creating are really strong or if they need improvement. And this is really important because it affects the quality score of your ad when you're bidding. So when different competitors are bidding, the quality score is a way that Google basically rewards really good quality ads, and it lowers the cost per click that you need to have to win an auction. If you have a low quality ad and it maybe doesn't match the landing page experience, then Google is going to set you up with a lower quality score. And the problem with that is that then you need to have a little bit more spend to win each search auction. That was one of the important things, because when we're talking about return on investment, we're talking about cost and profits,
Mhm.
cost and revenue. So we want to lower our costs as much as possible. And that means lowering the cost for clicks, and also looking at where we tend to sell higher revenue products, which campaigns tend to sell higher revenue products. And if we see a high ROI on certain campaigns, making sure that the spend is optimized to put a little bit more spend in those campaigns and a little bit less where the ROI isn't as strong. And so the initial ROI, well, after we put in conversion values, or after your team put in conversion value to be sent to Google Ads, the next step was to change the campaigns to optimize on return on investment.
And we had different campaigns based on the different business units we served, the customers in that one, and the products offered to them. So that's how we delineated that.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of, yeah, and on that note, then that was another optimization, was adding in a couple of more campaigns, things around competitor campaigns, and making sure we're tapping into incremental journeys where maybe the ROI isn't quite as strong, but that's purely incremental.
And I think the detailed analysis that you did on a monthly basis was very effective because just high level looking at it, what we did is we have to understand I run an e-commerce business. So that means I expect most of my people to be online searching. So thus I should be devoting a lot of time, effort, and money of my limited advertising and marketing campaign to online search, of which Google AdWords is predominantly the dominant one. And something other thing we talked about before is when I took over this organization, like we already had some years of history and the organization tried to do marketing on their own, then it was absolutely horrendous. Like they were spending literally tens of thousands of dollars on newspaper ads, on magazine ads, looking at doing radio ads. Like we're talking about an online business. So why are you devoting resources there? Is it because somebody come at you and said, this is how you reach people now. This is the way of doing things before. And it really shows that you have to be adaptable and you have to look at where are my customers? How can they find me? How can they find me when they need to find me? And thus they know what they need then, not later, not before. And certainly where do you reach your actual customers? So initially looked at we got to go online. We got to go to AdWords. But for years, it was just a very static thing. I would bid on some keywords and you get some results. But then I really started to look at it and say, as a business owner, how do I ensure that I'm getting the most return for every single dollar spent? That's why we looked at ROMI, return to marketing investment. And that's the key metric I care about. Because if I can spend a dollar in this particular way and make $2, that's fine. But if because of optimization, somebody like you can come in and do, I spend a dollar and I make $4.50, then I should put all my money to in order to generate $4.50 for every dollar. So that's basically what we did together. We sat down and we said, I already have this AdWords campaign. I've already had very good SEO built up over a number of years. Then that's critical. So somebody listening and you're like, oh, I should just target AdWords completely and not SEO. That's wrong. You definitely need a very strong SEO built up. And that's not just from gimmicks and like you read these things online to write this stuff, post these things here, and you'll get SEO. No, it's truly building it up over time. But at the same time, you had to look at where are my customers? What might they be searching for? The literal search term. I had to put myself in the mind of a customer, each of these campaign business units, and say they could be searching for, let's say, 20 different terms. Maybe I rank organically really well for 8 of them. Maybe 2 of them are like competitors' names, maybe 10 of them are generic. So that kind of determined which ones I should be devoting the spend to. And the work that we did together, you really showed me which particular keyword should stay, which should go, which should we bid more on. Maybe we should move those keywords that are directly about competitors to its own ad group so we can see if the overall ROMI of those is bringing down or pulling down the collective campaign. So I think people just need to see high level, but not getting into all the weeds, but high level. Something like this, the work that you do can really pay for itself 10, 20 more times just by optimizing what you're already done. Because you might be like, I'm spending money and I think I'm making money. You might not even know. Even if you know for a fact you've got some conversion metrics and you're like, I'm making, maybe you could make more. That's leaving money on the table. So why would you leave money on the table? So that's why you need to do this. And you need to do it regularly. We were updating this every month, sometimes even multiple times a month. So just high level, step back and say, look at that and understand that the impact that somebody like you can have on a business by fine tuning, tweaking, and analyzing can really pay dividends for itself.
Oh, thank you, Matt. That's really kind of you saying. And on that note, let's talk about the actual results. We'll exclusively talk about early 2024 and onwards because that's when we started working together and when the conversion values were introduced. So before then, we had assumed conversion values and
Right.
the campaigns weren't optimized on conversion value. So it's not.
And analytics has an easy way to set that up with a developer, or even if you have a simple site that uses certain plugins, you can get conversion values in there. And even if it takes some hours to do it, get it, because then you actually know what you're converting on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, especially if you're talking a lower funnel B2C sort of stuff, where it's really easy to associate a conversion value. It's totally different for a B2B business where you're talking about really long customer journeys and you might not know exactly what conversion value to place. If it's a B2C business and you're expecting a conversion at the end of the search journey, then it makes a lot of sense to use ROMI as your primary optimization metric. So what we saw at a high level after our work together, so a little bit over a year now, is over a 200% rise in revenue from paid ads. And this is in the tens of thousands. So we're talking about basically increasing spend and also increasing the return on that marketing investment. So both numbers increased, which typically you would see a decrease in the return rate as you increase the spend. But because we were making so many optimizations along the way, we were also able to increase the multiplier of that spend. What some of the things that I didn't mention was adding a lot of additional creatives. We did so much additional creative work for adding images, even AI generated images that can allow you to rapid prototype a lot of different new options for campaigns that previously you might not have had a lot of good options for. And then using things like the demographic breakdowns to say, instead of making ads that are just generally tailored to the campaign, what if we also tailor them to the type of user that's going on the search journey and show them in the ads without getting into too much detail about who those prospects were and what their general makeup was? We were able to basically tailor the ads to them and increase the quality score, lower the CPC, and all of that has a lot to do with why we were able to increase the multiplier. So not only did revenue increase, profit increased, and engagement increased. And that speaks to the optimizations in the copy. And the reality is that these days, you really can do the spray and pray. Spray and pray is a dirty word nowadays because it applies to like what marketers used to do, where they would just send out the same message to a ton of people. I would like to repurpose that for this example and say it's not one message to a lot of people, it's a lot of messages to the Google algorithm. And then you let Google optimize it to the search journey because there's so much data that Google has access to about all of us and what we'll respond to. And so the key is to feed Google as many options as possible for ad copy, headlines,
Mhm.
descriptions, images, and then let
Keywords too.
and keywords, yeah, and then allow Google to do the optimization on your behalf And yeah, I mean,
We put the strategy of we wanted $3 of revenue for every dollar spent. And that was the bidding strategy, and Google took it and ran with it.
yeah,
But it takes some time for the algorithm to work, but you just got to set it up right. That was key, right? You
yeah,
got to set up right, set up the ads right to the right kind of responsive ones, and also the bidding strategy to understand it's not just about spend and clicks, because I always wanted to put myself in the mind of a customer and be like, I know my products. Every business owner should know their products. What are they going to literally search for? And those are things I add to it every month on an ongoing basis. If I see things online, I'm like, they might use this exact term. That's why I always use exact match. And from the beginning, we always talked about that. I never really used dynamic because I thought that would cannibalize other things I already ranked really well for in SEO. And if somebody's watching and listening, they're going to be like, I already have a business. I already know I'm getting some people from Google, hopefully, and I don't want to cannibalize these certain terms. So I always look at exact match. These are things I don't get ranked for in SEO. Maybe I'm trying to, but SEO is a process. It's not a one-time gimmick. It's developed that. But in the meantime, let me bid on that. Or maybe I have competitors who now rank really well in these terms, and I'm number two, and I want to be number one. So it's something you got to look at all the time. And that's something to keep in mind. So setting up like you're talking about with the right strategy is critical.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the engagement rate increased 17.5% comparing the percent. I don't want to give away too much about the actual click through rates, but the click through rate increased by close to 20%. And that's a significant increase in click through rates. And all of that contributes to
Mhm.
higher return
And
on
that was
marketing investment.
mainly the ad creative and copy enhancements.
Yeah.
And so just that one thing alone, 20% more.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, Google can look at images, categorize them, and they basically show them to the people that they believe will be the most responsive. So they do process images that you're putting into Google Ads and serve them to like to the people that will respond best to them. So it's pretty amazing algorithm. We're really talking about harnessing an algorithm. It's no longer this really manual approach. You just need to make sure you're feeding the algorithm the right things. You're telling it to optimize a certain way. And we saw it work really well. And I
Right.
think the next step is to go for see what a 4x ROMI looks like for the
Oh,
goal
yeah.
and see how Google responds to that. I think it could work.
And it's also fun too. This is a little bit of a science experiment. It's not just spray and pray. It's not like the old mindset of I put out this ad in the newspaper and I'm waiting and hoping some people go in. I actually know for every dollar I spend on something, what actually leads to a sale.
Yeah.
I know that. And thus I can adjust that. I can work with that. Data is very powerful
Yeah.
in this era. Well, people also privacy conscious and they want their data share, but data is powerful, especially for a business owner. You want to know exactly what's effective for you to reach people because your time is limited and your money is limited. So that's why using somebody like you to go in and optimize this is great because you probably, as a business owner, don't have the time and you have limited resources. You're not like, I can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this and I don't really care if it's effective or not. You need to know it's effective and you want to deploy it in the right way. And that's why we've done this now for over a year. And we can look at every single thing we did incrementally, change creative, for instance, change these keywords, change this bidding strategy. Was it effective or not? Was this campaign effective or not? Was this ad group? And that's the kind of strategy you want, that very methodical approach, not just changing everything all at once. That's why somebody's listening. They're like, oh, I'm going to go in and change absolutely everything right now. Then do you really know what was working or not? So you got to be very careful and adjust. Maybe some things are working great now, and it's a continual refinement and tweaking that will get you to these much better results. And it's a continuous process, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Like one quarter, we might adjust one ad group up a couple dollars a day and another ad group down a couple dollars a day and run that for a few months and just see how the overall ROI changes. And then we'll make similar changes depending on where we're seeing strong performance. And we want to double down where we see the strength and then pull money a little bit away from places where there's weaker return unless it's strategically valuable. If you're tapping into a competitive journey, it's more expensive, so you're spending more. Your ROI is a little bit less. but those are purely incremental,
Right.
then that's a strategically valuable journey.
For
Yeah.
instance, it might be a competitor's name of an exact product, and we know that if we did not bid on that, then they would have gone to the competitive product, bought that product, but they happened to land on me and buy it. So let's say I'm going for $3 for every dollar spent, and that's only $1.75. That's still incremental. I would have never had that. That's why I like our approach of using these different ad groups with different kinds of keywords so we can see not all of them needs to be weighed the same way.
Yeah, but I want to reiterate that this all works because of all the upfront work to make sure we're not bidding on inevitable user journeys. If you're allowing Google to just bid on whatever, you have broad match keywords and it's just bidding on everything, then the problem is that you're just not Google's telling you nonsense, basically. Like the return is nonsense because a lot of that would have come anyway if you didn't spend anything. So it's super important to set the foundation with deep analytics and knowledge from an SEO perspective. I want to briefly talk about a couple of other tests that we did. One of them was basically optimizing towards which page we should send audiences to on their journey because there's some pages where there's like an intro page and then you get into the actual product page.
Right.
So basically we split the ad group into two, copied the keywords over,
Mhm.
and then did basically which page was more effective.
Do you want to land on these static landing pages that I optimized for SEO or directly on ordering the product? Because they're different.
Yeah.
A great A/B testing right there.
Yeah, so that's an example of an A/B test. Another one is I was trying to get around Google's algorithm because when you're talking about religious products, Google has certain restrictions. And so they might limit your bidding abilities. And so I tested basically taking all of the religious keywords out versus taking all the religious ad messaging, ad copy out, and then seeing where if we were able to basically get around the religious
Right.
restrictions.
And I don't think we mentioned in the beginning, but I run an online Catholic focused business. So religion keywords are my business.
Right.
A copy for people looking for things for the Catholic religion is my business. So how do I get around Google ad restrictions? Because some people think about Google ad restrictions and they think, oh, I must be selling firearms. I must be selling narcotics, some kind of pharmaceuticals, is actually very broad. It's very encumbersome, so much that honestly, if somebody's out there selling a Bible business, they're probably going to be totally encumbered by this. There's so many restrictions Google imposes. Even for instance, Facebook, some people think maybe Google's hard. I'll just go to Facebook ads. They don't let you target people by religion, but maybe that's who you need to target.
Yeah.
It's very broad. So advertisers out there and business owners really have to look at how do you reach your audience because you know your audience. And that's why using an expert to manage and handle these ads is very effective because you might put all this in and be like, good, it's great. And if you don't check it, you'll see that all your ads were disqualified and they're not showing. And then you think you have this great ad campaign running and it never actually ran because the ads were disapproved.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we learned that there's really no way to get around the Google algorithm. And the key is just to continuously add new options, new headlines, and descriptions. And Google will basically optimize from there. And even if it's somewhat limited, that may just be the nature of how religious or other sort of somewhat restricted businesses can operate
Yeah.
on advertising
And
platforms.
learning about these things. So if you're running an ad campaign and you see your ad is restricted versus not approved, there's going to be slight nuances and you might think it means something, but it actually means something else. So a little bit of searching online yourself, what do these mean? Are these actually showing? Could be helpful because I find the Google help and support system to be too much. There's too many FAQs, there's too much there. Go online or use an expert to find out what does this actually mean? What should I do from here?
Yeah. And speaking of experts, everybody Google sends you, and I talk to them all the time at my day job, my full-time job. Their goal is to get you to spend as much money with Google as possible.
Absolutely. They send me messages all the time. Oh, we'll have a specialist talk with you. That specialist who works for Google, they obviously want me to spend more money. So they don't care about my ROMI. They don't care about for every dollar I put in what return I'm getting. They would only care about it insofar as, are you spending more money? Their goal is to get you to spend more money. And I say this as somebody who has plenty of Google stock. So Google's been around a long time. I'm not bashing the business, but they're incentivized to do something. A business owner is incentivized to deploy their resources in the most optimal way possible. So honestly, talking to these people, they're not going to understand your business well as you do. Nobody else will. Hopefully, you understand it better than everybody else. But they're also going to come in and they're going to say, you need to spend more on this. You need to turn on broad keywords because you need to reach many people as possible. You need to do all of these extra call outs and all of these extra options, which increase cost. So that way you can have a higher optimization score in Google. That score really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is, what do I make for the dollar I spend? A Google ad consultant who works for Google will not be the person you want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. A third party is essential just given the incentives
Right.
that they have. So yeah, that is super important to note, that be wary of that optimization score, like you said. Be wary of performance max. Look at the types of ads that you are deploying on Google, because there are certain ad types that sound fine, but they actually allow for bidding on other search journeys that you don't even have keywords for. And Google just deploys those ads and bills you, and you might even get sales from them. They might even have an amazing ROI, but that's because Google knows that these are inevitable user journeys, high intent user journeys, and they're bidding on it anyway because they want to show you that high return number. And
Right.
meanwhile, it really doesn't mean anything because the return would have been infinite because you would have otherwise spent zero on it.
Yes, these are people who are already going to search the keywords that I rank well. For instance, my business name. They're obviously looking for me. Somebody who works at Google might say, bid on all this. Sure, it's very relevant, but I don't need to bid on this because I have SEO for it.
Yeah.
So they take a cut of money that I would have otherwise gotten,
Yeah.
that I have worked to build over really strategic, long-term organic SEO growth. And also, like, these things change. Like, in a year we've done it, we might have paused some keywords because now my SEO ranks them well. Maybe the market has changed. You need other keywords. Maybe I've launched other products and I need new ad campaigns. Maybe this campaign should be split into different campaigns. So that's why it's completely an iterative process, that you got to put yourself in the mindset of both your own consumer as well as somebody like you who handles the marketing piece from a Google AdWords perspective to navigate all this. It's not a once a year, or certainly not a once and done approach. I think you should look at it every single month.
Yeah.
Every single month. What keywords that drove a return? Are the campaigns RMI positive? How is the RMI trending over time? Do I need to add new keywords? Do I need to add new creative? That's why you might not have time to answer those questions. You might not have, you're just running your business, or maybe you do a business where you're not just selling products that already exist, but you have to do the work. You certainly don't have time for this. That's why you need somebody else to come in who sits down like you did, who understands your business because they learned it and they put themselves in the mind of the consumer, and then they can manage it. And every dollar you spend to somebody like you generates a significant return above and beyond because you're able to determine where to deploy that capital better than anybody else, because you are truly the marketing expert then for the small business.
Thank you again, Matt. This has been a great overview of the work we've done. There's more we haven't even mentioned, but we're not going to go over every single detail. But I really appreciate you joining, Matt, and just talking about all the great work we did. It was really a pleasure to work with you. And Google Ads is changing a lot. So it's important to hire people that can stay on top of the changes
Yeah.
and stay really close and understand the analytics. Marketing is, when they say marketing is a little bit art and a little bit science, that ratio changes every day and it's always changing in the direction of science. And in 10, 15 years, it's going to be almost 100% science. Or I think we're going to get it all very close over time. Maybe we'll never get to 100%, but we'll certainly get closer over time.
So you obviously have never worked for Google. So you come in here as somebody who can understand the product and then deploy it. So I would say you also could, if somebody was listening and like for some reason really found Bing to be useful, you could potentially do that for them,
Yep.
or Facebook or somebody else, or we haven't even talked about it, but ChatGPT. So many people are searching AI things. Now, how do you determine that you come up in AI?
Yeah.
That's maybe the next best thing. That's why you need to not be so focused on the particulars of This one tool, I just need to figure it out myself and it's fine. Using somebody who's a marketing expert helps you be on the cutting edge of those changes. Because there was a time that Google AdWords was a new thing and nobody understood it. And then other things come, and now we're on the cutting edge of something else. So even if you're like, okay, I got some tips from this episode and I'm going to employ those in my AdWords and be fine, that might be okay today, but it's all about being forward looking. So you don't want to look back like my business did early on when I took over and I thought, why are you guys spending so much money in ads that are ineffective that you have no idea actually generated things? I always want to be on the cutting edge. So that's why you got to stay by people who are on the cutting edge, people like yourself. So I hope people who listen say, you know what, if I have a small business, I would like somebody else to just come in here and look under the hood and say, is this running right? It seems fine to me, but maybe it can be better. And that's why I'm happy to endorse the work that you did. And I hope that other people would reach out to you and really use that, because every dollar they spend with you, I think they'll really see a significant return.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.